Okay, hi everybody. My name is Brook Cronin. I'm Senior UI UX Designer for Qt, and for the last 3 years I've been working on Qt Design Studio. So when you see me normally at a show or a virtual conference or a real conference, I'm normally always talking about Qt Design Studio, latest features, latest version, maybe a bridge demo or something like this. Today we're going to be doing something completely different. I'm actually going to show one of my personal projects that I'm very proud of and is built with Qt. And this is Omnidome, which is an immersive mapping, projection mapping software. Now, Omnidome was created by myself and by my friend and colleague, Michael Winkelmann, who also works for the Qt company. And it was developed with Qt and it's available open source. So what is Omnidome? Well, Omnidome is an immersive mapping software. We decided around about 6 or 7 years ago that we wanted to try and build something like this. Reason was, at the time we were working with a light art, video art installation collective here in Berlin called the Lichtpiraten. That's the light pirates for people who don't speak German. And we were talking about how cool it would be to be able to do a full kind of dome projection, planetarium style, immersive piece with live audio, visual, music and stuff like this. And so we looked around for solutions for this. And at that point in time, there wasn't really anything that you could just kind of buy off the shelf as an app. And most of the sort of software and hardware that you'd need to kind of do something like this was very expensive, very limiting, and created a barrier for artists that meant that a lot of artists couldn't kind of experiment with these techniques without having kind of serious funding behind them. So we decided that we were going to do something about that, and we wanted to release a tool for artists that was completely free to use, was open source, and allowed people to experiment in this sort of field of immersive projection art. And as such, we created Omnidome. Like I said, it was all built with Qt and released open source. And it's very much designed for artists. So it doesn't do anything for you automatically. It doesn't have automatic calibration or anything like that. But it has a lot of degree of control for the artists to actually experiment beyond standard kind of immersive dome projections. It's all open source. It's all out there for you to use. There are DMGs, and now I think even Windows version is ready. Linux version, of course, multi-platform because it's from Qt. And what does it do? What's it sort of about? So what you can do with Omnidome is you can map your immersive content to an arbitrary geometry. You can simulate the multiple projectors that you need to actually kind of cover your dome or box or geometry that you have. And you can warp, blend, and color correct each projector image to create one continuous image from these multiple projectors. And these features are really useful because often you're working with domes that are not perfect spheres, and you're working with projectors that are not all exactly the same, or bulbs are slightly older than each other, and you need these kind of tools in order to create a nice looking image at the end. Well, it's a good example of this is the sort of classical fisheye to half sphere that I think a lot of people would probably understand from a planetarium. So you have your fisheye content, this 180-degree view in this sort of circular image. Sometimes it's called dome master content, but it's just fisheye content, and you map that across a canvas. So you actually kind of stretch this fisheye image down across a half sphere, and then of course when you stand in the center of that sphere, everything is corrected so that it looks realistic. It looks immersive in that sense that you are inside that environment. And then what you need to do, as I mentioned, is you need to split that image across these multiple projectors. So in the real world, you'll have as many projectors as you need to cover the entire space. You then simulate that in Omnidome, and it slices that content image across those projectors into your immersive projection mapping piece. So not should be a video. No, I'm not in Keynote. Oh, perhaps I'm just wrong. Okay, so this is how it all comes together, what I was talking about. On the left, you have this sort of small fisheye image, which is your preview image. In the middle of your scene, you have your actual kind of geometry, you have your canvas, and then on the right, you have your projector slices. In order to actually kind of really make this work in the real world, you need a few extra tools. So you need to be able to kind of fine tune your mapping with the warp grids, for example. If you're working in a geodesic dome tent, that's not going to be a perfect sphere, and in some cases you're actually going to need to kind of visually correct that, optically correct your mapping in order that everything matches up again. You also need something like mask brushes for blending. There are a bunch of different ways of doing that automatically, and there are other kind of UX patterns you could do for this with just sliders and stuff, but we actually found that brushes were the best for general artists used to understand how to kind of paint out the different overlapping parts of their images to create one sort of single image in the end out of their projectors. And you also want something like color correction for each channel, for each projector. Again, you know, if you're an artist working at a festival for a relatively low budget project, you probably don't have 4 top of the line, brand new bulb projectors in it. You might be using sort of 3 different projectors, and they all have slightly different age bulbs. And in that case, you're going to need something like color adjustment to be able to get that image to match up, to get all the whites and black points to look correct for each projector. Okay, this is a video. So you can see a little bit of this here. In the middle, you have this kind of canvas space and the projectors, and then you can kind of click between each of these projectors and use the warp grids on each projector, which allows you to kind of fine tune this mapping. And then you're going to be able to blend out the different edges of your projectors so that you have one single continuous image, and you can kind of feather or hard blend, or sort of really you can do that as you like as an artist, as whatever suits your needs the best. And then you can also color correct. So you can color correct each projector image to try and create the best quality for that single composite image as you can. And once you're done with that, then you go into this live mode. That's going to lock down all of the settings and speed up performance, and then you can actually kind of feed in your image from somewhere else, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So really early on, we realized that we actually wanted to go beyond just that sort of standard fisheye half dome setup, which is what a lot of these tools were built around. So right from the beginning, we also decided we wanted to work with equirectangular images. Again, this was kind of as VR was really becoming a thing. So equirectangular stuff was suddenly popping up everywhere. And also we wanted to work with cube maps as well, which is it's a kind of a classic way of creating this 360 content in Unity or in After Effects. I have a bunch of different projects where I've used both of those to create sort of immersive 360 content from Cinema 4D, from After Effects, from Unity. And in these cases, I tend to use a cube map. And we also recognized that we wanted to go beyond the basic half dome canvas. So this planetarium style half dome, yeah, it's really nice, but you know, it's quite limiting as well. Really, not everybody has a dome kicking around in their house. So we wanted to kind of open that up to some different options. So full sphere mapping, which we have done on many occasions, and it works really nicely. Boxes are great because that means you can just use a room in your house. You can do that in your living room or in your office or wherever, and that can be any kind of, doesn't have to be perfectly square, that can be any kind of rectangular room that you can also map with Omnidome. Cylinders are really cool. I've got one example later on of us doing this with a real event with one of these big kind of information points in the middle of a convention center. So one of these big glass information point cylinders that we mapped with Omnidome. And then finally 3D models, which really means you can load in any geometry and then as long as you can cover it with your projector images, you can map something onto it. I think there's another video, yeah, exactly, just showing that in effect. So you have this 3D model, you can then map a cube map onto it, and you can see now that's the cube map wrapped around this 3D model, or a box with a cube map wrapped around it, or and then what I do, I think, is I'm just changing that input. So now I'm changing the input to equirectangular and the mapping to equirectangular. So now we have an equirectangular image wrapped around a box. And so on and so forth. You really are not limited to what you map to what. This is the classic spherical mapping with an equirectangular image, but at the same time, you could also map a cube map to a sphere, and it would work just as well. So really flexible in terms of what you can do with it. A very open-ended toolkit for artists, so not just for creating this kind of standard immersive 360 experience, but actually to be able to experiment with the formats and experiment with canvases and experiment with the technologies and the techniques involved in making any kind of immersive art or immersive experience. Also with Omnidome, you can actually transform these mapping coordinates. So yeah, you can transform your scene, so you don't have to have these perfect squares or even perfect circles or perfect half circles. Not everything has to be aligned in the classical dimensions. You can rotate and twist and skew your object, so you can start to create really interesting kind of mapping scenes from different perspectives that really go beyond the standard defined way these tools used to behave or would normally behave. And also the same with the mapping itself. So you can actually start to really experiment with the mapping. You can kind of skew your mapping or rotate it or scale the mapping across your object. And you know, as you do it, the art becomes a bit more abstract, but in certain cases, maybe that's exactly the effect you want. You might want this weird field of vision effect where everything is sort of narrowing to a point of your mapping. And traditionally, you wouldn't necessarily be able to achieve that, or you'd have to kind of bake it into the content somehow. But with Omnidome, you can actually play around so much with the mapping that you can actually create these interesting visual effects and experiences playing with the tool just using your standard content. And I think that one of the things that we discovered from the artists who use this, and there is quite a big community of artists who use Omnidome, is that actually they create weird and wonderful things that you'd have never thought of just by being able to kind of play with the settings and the parameters of their mappings in these ways. And then, yeah, how do you play your content? So Omnidome just does mapping. If you want to actually plug content in and you're on a Mac, then you would use Siphon. Siphon is a sort of graphics context sharing little utility, really cool, made by Vade and Bang Noise and these guys who have been in the scene for a really long time. Siphon's kind of everywhere, and it's one of these standards for VJ software and artists to use. Video for Linux works as well. That's a cool thing that you can actually build Omnidome on a Linux server and use a Video for Linux stream to get your content into it. Works great. Or Blackmagic, so hardware capture, which is the best possible setup you can have. You just run Omnidome on a really small dedicated display server that has 5, 6, 7, 8 projector ports on it. And then you just plug your laptop in via HDMI with your VJ content on your laptop, and different VJs can come and play, and Omnidome just sits on the server and does the mapping. And I think, you know, we had that up and running for 4 or 5 days straight, no reboot, no crash, no nothing. It's super solid on a server. You can throw anything at it. Your content creation software might crash, but Omnidome will keep on running. Yeah, that's how that looks like. So here you have this live feed of a 360 fragment shader coming in from some VJ software. Personally, I use VDMX. I really like it. Again, thanks, Dave, for all the free licenses that you've given us over the years. And yeah, you can see here, I know that with Zoom you don't get a super good frame rate, so I'll just go through it again. But you can really see there that this 360 content is being remapped over your geometry. And I can tell you that when you stand in the middle of a 10-meter dome that looks like this, with some DJs or live music playing, that looks really, really cool. It's super funky. Now, these are some of the projects that we've done over the years. This is actually probably my favorite of all of our projects. This was in Teufelsberg, which, for those of you who don't know Berlin very well, this is the legendary ex-CIA listening station that's on top of the hill, which is Teufelsberg, so Devil's Mountain, outside of the city. And this used to point down into East Germany and would be used for spying on the East Germans and the East German government at the time. And it was long abandoned and fell into sort of this abandoned state, but still had these amazing dome right up at the top, which we were incredibly lucky to be invited to actually go and make a live video mapping, live music concert in. And you can see there, this is the top inside of this radar dome, all mapped with Omnidome. This is how it looks from the outside. So again, we were really lucky. Our friends who run this light collective brought up all the best lights and lasers and everything. And we filled up this entire huge space with lights and massive lasers and projection mapping and everything. It's very cool. This is us doing the setup here. We ran this off one laptop, 4 projectors, and the audio equipment. So real artist setup, but it looked awesome for what it was. And that's us during the event there. This is Michael Winkelmann and our friends, the Lichtpiraten, on the stage at that time. And as you see, we had a few hundred people, private guests, people who came to see this show. And again, you can kind of see it there as with the lights on. This is before we started. Another one of my favorite projects, this is a collaboration with good friends of ours called Toto. People who don't know Toto, Toto is an amazing game engine. It's a game engine for the real world. So you can essentially model a game on Toto and then play it in the real world, like a scavenger hunt or a full city tour, or I mean, there's so much more. What you can do with Toto is mind-blowing. So essentially you have like a smartphone client and you're all playing a multiplayer game in real time, and Toto is calculating all the geofences and challenges and point scoring and mapping and videos and images and whatever else. And we were invited to Performmersion, which is sort of part of the Republica family of festivals. And what we did here is we actually created an interactive game with Toto and Omnidome, where we mapped out the entire building. We used a 3D model to map out the entire building, and Toto drove the projections. So based on the state of the game, with the players are playing, the projections were automatically basically generated by the players in their game. So all the different pathways and the sort of puzzle pieces they put down and all the art on the walls and the countdown timer, in this case, is all sort of automatically driven by a game engine. Various CCC projects. So for those, again, who don't know, CCC is the Chaos Computer Club. Myself and Misha have been part of this scene for a long time, for very many years, and most of our friends are part of this scene. And so over the years, we've set up installations at various congresses and camps run by the CCC. This is one of the congresses down in Hamburg before they moved in the information point at the front. This is what I was talking about at the beginning about the cylindrical mapping. So we were actually inside this thing, and we were mapping it from the inside out, and then we'd also mapped the whole thing all the way around. as an installation. You can kind of see there, you can almost see through to the tech inside. And that's from the inside, so you can see there we're in there with, and I think we were with the synth workshop guys. So it was a synthesizer workshop inside a bubble with live projections. This one here is at Camp 2015, I think. And again, audio live production inside this one, inside this little geodesic dome. Again, from the inside, this was another collaboration with our friends, the Lichtpiraten, and it was sort of live music, live audio visuals. This one is Congress 14, I guess. This one's really cool. What we actually did here is we put half a dome in a wall and then back projected it. So we built this kind of staging setup where we then projected it from behind. And so from the front, you have this kind of magic mirror. So this is a dome going back into a wall inside a chill room with some wonderful sort of hand-rendered artwork from our friend Steph, who did all of the rest of the art and illustration and set design for the piece. And we had these kind of constellations and star maps and everything inside this dome. And you could even, I think this is where we had the Kinect set up, and you could even kind of pan these around and spin them around with hand gestures. So you could sit in this chill out room and play with star maps in this virtual dome that you can kind of stick your head inside. And there you see some people there kind of spinning some star maps around at the Congress. Okay, so what are we up to at the moment? Well, never as much as we'd like to. It's a side project, and you know, there are certain things that we do get done, certain things that we don't. We have worked on making the build system easier. I think that that's actually now already done. So Omnidome had a release at the spring this year where with all the build system fixes. The Windows version is already out there. Blackmagic plugins are there, they've been released. And what we're still actually working on right now is a remote control app. And actually a sort of version 2 for the UI, which is all being prototyped and concepted in Qt Design Studio at the moment. But you know, no release dates because it's actually just a fun project that I don't have enough time to do as much as I'd like to. So yeah, that was the slides, and now I can actually just jump in and show you Omnidome. If I make this full screen, just minimize my Zoom stuff, get it out of the way. So this is the, I guess you can actually see the toolbar, whereas I can't because this Zoom window always gets in the way. Just make it a little bit smaller and I can see it too. Okay, so this is Omnidome here. It says no screen connected because I don't have a projector plugged in. Normally, if I had projectors plugged in, they would all come up here. And if I was using something like a triple head, you'd have one big projection screen. If I was using 4 individual projectors, you'd have 4 projection screens, and then you can drag these projectors onto the virtual projectors onto the real screens. But as I don't have one, we don't need it. I can start by adding this test image here, in which case it's fisheye or equirectangular or a cube map. And then I go into my space. So here I have my different canvases. The half dome is the standard with the fisheye image, and inside that half dome there, you see I have the first of my projectors here. So that virtual projector, what you would do is you'd put your real projector in first in your space to cover all of the bits that you need, and then this virtual projector you'd have to actually kind of map that setup. So you have all of the different settings here. You have all of these sort of yaw and pitch, and tower height, and then some sort of delta shifts and delta yaws, roll if you need it, if you mounted something sideways and you need to correct for it. And then you have your sort of projector settings as well. So sort of field of view, which is more often called throw ratio in projector speak, and your keystone. So all of the sort of settings that you need here per projector. And what you do is you just keep adding projectors until you've covered that space completely. Once you've covered that space completely, you have your projection mapping set up. And if you wanted to change that to something else, you could come in here, but then what you need to do is also make sure that you pick the correct mapping type. So this would be using a cube map to map to a cube. And then these are what the individual projectors here on the right would actually see to be able to create that mapping. And then you have the warp grids. Again, like I said, not every surface in reality is as perfect as it is in the virtual world. So you will always have slight defects in the surfaces you're projecting on, and you just correct for those with a little bit of warping, bringing the projector edges together. Sometimes you need to do that with especially wide angle projectors because you get this kind of barrel distortion on the edge of your projection surface. And, you know, it might be that, again, artist low budget, you don't have 5 projectors or 6 projectors and you've got to make it work with 4. So you have to warp that barrel distortion a little bit in order to get that image working. This is your input. This is your projection mapping, sort of projection settings, your mapping controls as well. Translate and rotate the mapping as you need. Essentially, you know, we wanted to make it really that you could, as an artist, you could experiment with this tool. That you weren't limited to a sort of certain type of projection, that you actually had complete control over the way that this mapping worked. Blending is really useful. Lots of different sort of settings here. So you can either have different types of masks, just when you want to see color on color. You can actually have your real image, or you can blend between a colored mask and your real image. Helps you an awful lot. If you then want to just kind of brush out an area of your projection that is overlapping with another projector, and so you don't need it in the surface. You know, bigger brushes. You can have nice feather on the brush as well. So that you can actually, you know, if you spend the time, really kind of create very cool mapping just with these tools here. And bring it back again as well. So yeah, this is the blending process. You would do that across, usually across most of the edges on all of your projections until you kind of really just have one image without any overlapping projection parts. Color correction is also there. So, you know, one projector might be duller or brighter than another, and you need to really kind of tweak it. And you have these sort of standard brightness, contrast, gamma, multiplier, and then through all the different color channels as well. So a full sort of multi-channel color correction. You can just also toggle that on and off. Which is essentially all you really need to be able to kind of do this immersive mapping. And once you do have your setup correct, you go into this live mode, and in this live mode, you'll actually be able to speed everything up and just see a preview of your final output here. Okay, so, you know, maybe finally, I'll just very quickly connect it to some VJ software. Now, this normally makes my computer freak out because it just is a bit much for this laptop while Zoom is running as well. But we can just do a little bit and try. Okay, I think I was using something here, right? So VDMX, VJ software, you see here I've got some audio reactive clip going on there. This isn't even proper 360 material. This is just some basic colors and sources and stuff like that. And then I have a plugin with a siphon output here. And this siphon output just allows me to choose either a layer or my main output or wherever I want to send to Omnidome. And in this case, I can come in and add this siphon input, and then we see that there mapped over the projectors. There we go. And that's it really. This is this whole setup, and you know, from that as an artist, you can actually create really cool immersive experiences. It's something that we've done ourselves over the years many times, and still always look forward to the next outing and the next festival or the next place where we're going to get invited to make a cool piece. We've worked with loads of other artists who use it and help them set things up, and it has a pretty cool niche community of artists who use it a lot and really like it, and we still get mail, you know, 6-7 years after creating it, that people want to know what's going on and they want to use it, or they just discovered it, or they've been using it for a long time and just wanted to say thanks. And none of that would be possible without Qt, because that's actually what enabled us to bootstrap this project with you know, relatively small team and no budget to speak of, and provide a tool for artists the world over to actually use to create something cool with. And I think that's it. I think that's, you know, probably not even 40 minutes, but that's all I have prepared for today. So if anybody does have any questions, then please feel free to ask them.
All right, so it looks like we have a question here from Sean, and I'm gonna go ahead and unmute him so that he can ask his question. Go ahead, Sean.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, Brooke, this is excellent. Well done.
Thanks.
So, you know, you mentioned use case, you know, connecting to game engines like Unity or Unreal. You know, I guess really more of a future look. What are your thoughts on expanding this to users, you know, in a virtual reality environment, making it easier for artists working within and wearing a VR headset, and perhaps manipulating the, you know, the dome or the room around them? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that people are doing already, so it's out there, and people are certainly doing that. I know from our side of at least 2 big companies who have investigated doing this kind of stuff with Omnidome. One of them was a commercial space flight company who wanted to simulate the space flight experience. And of course, you know, VR headsets are awesome, and they've come so far since we started doing this, but it's not a shared experience. It's not like you and 20 people can sit inside a VR headset and see the same thing. You can all have your own headsets in the same environment, but there is still something to be said for a shared experience, and certainly mixing both together. And again, this is another one which is sort of the funny version of releasing open source software for artists, is that there was actually a military technology company who used this to simulate tank ground war simulations in a simulation room. And again, I think their drivers had headsets, and then they used Omnidome to map the surrounding kind of area, the actual kind of environments for these tank drivers to practice in. Now, this is not something personally I would, you know, a use case I would support or champion or be really proud of or anything. But when you release open source software, that's the kind of thing that happens. And at a certain point, you sort of have to say, well, it's out there for everybody to use, and they're using it for their use case. But yeah, they do these kind of things where they will use these things in combination with VR, because the formats are so similar. Because essentially, if you have a VR environment, be that a game engine or a video or whatever that you're streaming to a VR headset, that will be using equirectangular content somewhere along the line. So you can also just pipe that into Omnidome and then fill up a room with it as well, be it a hall or a dome or a small bedroom or a little mini dome in front of your desk. So yeah, I do see already that people experiment with these kind of things, and I'm very interested to see what happens in the future with this kind of stuff as well. I think that with AR and you know, mixed reality stuff as well, there is certainly something there. But you know, there's also this scaling issue, right? So VR is quite expensive, and it comes down into this consumer grade stuff right now, but it's still quite expensive. AR will start quite expensive, I'm sure, and come down. And making big installations typically is very, very expensive. So it's something that's reserved for an elite class of artists, and not something that every video artist can just go and pick up. And really, Omnidome was designed to be this low-end solution that everybody can use. And so how well it plays with these kind of big future technologies, I've no idea, but because it's quite unbounded and it's not sort of limited in what it can do, it's definitely has the potential to be used in ways that even I can't really imagine yet, or I can't actually kind of envision myself.
Excellent. Thanks, Brook.
Welcome.
All right, do we have any more questions from our audience? You can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask Brook.
This is not really a question so much as a comment, but I happened to see that the Oklahoma Air and Space Museum was utilizing this technology, and there's several really good Vimeos that are on the web that really kind of give you a sense of scope and just kind of the grandeur of some of these huge rooms. Unfortunately, the demo can't really do it justice, but if you think about how many, especially like, you know, in Hollywood, how many movie sets exist only in the artist's mind. I gotta believe that this is going to become more and more popular as you go inside of a building that doesn't truly exist anymore.
Right. I mean, you saw that they've been doing this with live filming for the new Star Wars, wasn't it? The Mandalorian. They had all of their virtual environments in these big, and I think they weren't projected as much as they were actually huge kind of LED screen backgrounds, but they were all running these real-time render, real-time backgrounds inside these kind of immersed spaces and then filming into it as well. So there was a sort of breakthrough there at a certain point when the technology reached that quality level, that it suddenly became actually possible to stream your movie background directly in behind your, no more green screen anymore, just actually the real thing. The real fake thing as it is in a computer generated world. But yeah, what I've actually noticed is that in the US, there is a huge kind of fandom for domes and dome building and projection mapping in domes and stuff like that. Over the years, we've had so many large to small individuals to organizations from the US who've actually contacted us. And I think, you know, up there in the US and Canada as well, in North America, there are lots of these kind of almost institutions and organizations specializing in this type of media and making festivals, and people building their own domes, people kind of making their own setups, and as you mentioned, really big museum pieces that are based around this technology as well, that are fantastic to see. And yeah, it's been really cool to kind of be there at such an early phase in these kind of stuff, to be really early into the sort of homebrew scene for this, that we actually had a lot of contact with a lot of these people, and we know a lot of the people who make the other kind of software and solutions, and a lot of the artists out there. And so yeah, it's been great. And every time I see something in the real world that's really big, I kind of ask myself, oh, I wonder if they're using Omnidome or maybe something else.
Yeah, kudos. It's amazing software.
Thanks.
All right, do we have any more questions from our attendees today? Okay, everyone, thank you for joining us. And please,
I think Sean has his hand up again.
Oh, Sean.
From earlier, but you know what? I do have another question though. As far as object recognition, and then you know that might be more on the camera, but you know when you're projecting into a real world space and you've got, you know, say glass, which doesn't portray as well as paint or any other surface, you know, is that part of the plan to, you know, perhaps recognize difficult surfaces and eliminate them?
I mean, it's not something we've tried before. I think that traditionally speaking, if you're doing this sort of in a projection dome, you try and keep that surface as matte as you can. I think you saw maybe in one of the examples, we were projecting in this glass box, but what we did there is we actually kind of filled all the windows with that thin sort of muslin fabric that catches the light. But, you know, I've seen some really cool things. Our friend, the Lichtberaten, the art crew, they very often do at one of the cool Berlin festivals, Nation of Gondwana, they project into volumes of water spray. So they go out into the lake and they put this kind of big water jet into the lake that sprays up a huge kind of 30-meter sort of cloud of water vapor, and then they back project into that. And it looks really holographic. So you have this full three-dimensional, almost holographic projection just from water volume. So, and that's the kind of thing that you need crazy artists to think of, right? Like it's almost something that I can't plan or predict from a software design perspective, what awesome effects people can come up with. So I'm sure that there are people who've used this to project through different gradients of glass and through different gradients of fabric and through other material surfaces in order to create really cool effects. But yeah, it's not something that I've experimented very much with myself. I've tended to kind of work with relatively flat canvases that pick up the light as best as possible. But yeah, I'm certain that there are people out there experimenting with how can you bounce that through glass to make it even cooler, and how can you fill up glass with smoke from a smoke machine and then you know, project through the middle of the smoke through the glass to create some kind of cool effect out of it. And yeah, I'm certain that there are people out there experimenting with it. It's unfortunate that I don't have as much time as I'd like to make art these days.
Well, the reason why I ask is it was, you know, I had worked on a marketing campaign for a vehicle launch, which was precisely what you mentioned, through, you know, water vapor and you know, projecting it. And you know, I remember the pain points of doing something like that, where this seems like, you know, it was right in line with precisely what was happening, because we knew the surface, we knew the you know, height and the width to project on, and it was really up to very manual process for the artist to be able to project into a out in space.
Right. This would help, of course, because once you have a 3D model, if you have a model of your glass object, then you can map that you can map your art around that model really accurately. And then what happens on the surface of that glass, that's really interesting. I don't know exactly, but I'm certain there are certain kind of types of one-way mirrors or glass with or smoked glass or whatever that actually would capture the light really nicely, and they would almost glow. They would, you know, take on this otherworldly effect to them. But yeah, Omnidome, again, if you've got any kind of arbitrary geometry that you have a model of, Omnidome will allow you to map your projection image really closely to that. So whether be that the surface of a car or a giant bunny or a room or an old factory hall or whatever it is that you're mapping onto.
Very cool.
Sean, thanks for that great question. And do we have any more questions from our audience? Okay. Thank you everyone for joining us, and please join us on October 22nd at the Cute World Summit online. We will be having riveting talks in a virtual environment where you can render your very own 3D avatar and immerse yourself online on the platform, and you will be able to chat with our cute experts, and we'll also have captivating talks from not only the cute experts and partners, but additional keynotes. So claim your free ticket today at cuteworldsummit.com. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Thanks very much, everybody.